feel it's strange actually being here, and it would be even stranger if we were in UCL, because it would have been almost all the strands of my background tied together. So normally I gloss over the time I spent as a project manager and a program manager, and I talk about the more interesting AI stuff, but it's relevant today. So my background is a bit varied. So I did study at UCL. My degree was in computer science, specialising in artificial intelligence in the final year. It's a 4-year degree. And I tried getting involved in AI startups at that time, but it was the wrong time. I think they've even officially termed it the AI winter, and we're talking about 15 years ago, so around 2004. It was the wrong time really for AI. There were startups in this space, they're still around now, but the cloud didn't exist, big data didn't exist, mobile was just emerging really, so it just wasn't the right time for this technology. Both of those companies were in the fraud detection space. It's a very relevant use case back then, and it is even now, but it wasn't the right time. So I did what I said I would never do as a university student, which was end up in banking, something many people can relate to. And I have to admit, when I heard the talk earlier talking about forecasts of your roadmap and scenarios, I was, a bit of a cold sweat. I was remembering my days at Deutsche Bank, where it was like, oh yeah, if we only gave you 90% or 80%, what could you still deliver from that? And running those scenarios, so very relevant. And the talk earlier about Jira and people using priority I had flashbacks of a conversation about why is, when a bug is raised, the severity and the priority was set differently. Yeah. But all really practical, relevant examples for the project management space. So it's good to kind of be back amongst that group, but also with something very new and interesting to talk to you about. So I'll fast forward through my career. I started as a software developer. I worked around not technical things, but then the kind of transitional kind of transformation programs. And I did the journey through development to project management and business analysis as well. I've done some agile stuff. I've done a Scrum coach, and at one stage of my career, because as a consultant, at one stage, depending on the day of the week it is, you're an expert in something different sometimes. And then I kind of got onto RPA, and RPA was interesting for me because I was in the AI space for a while. So having seen this wave of AI and all the hype around it, I found that actually, if you kind of actually know what it's really about, which was from my background, and you're in a consulting space and you're in front of clients, if you can combine knowing what you're talking about and being in those conversations with clients, you can actually be very useful because there's so much hype around this. I think there was a stat recently around the number of AI startups that have no AI in their product whatsoever. But then even just the term AI is such a loaded term, and people get really hung up on how they define it and analyze it. But that was the space I was in. I was in consultancy. I was involved in setting up a machine learning and AI practice for a consultancy, advising clients in financial services. But we kind of got stuck really, to be honest. It was, the technology was now right. People were interested, but data security was one challenge. The amount of data we required to train some of our models was another challenge. And at that time, this was again about 18 months, 2 years ago, we couldn't really guarantee outcomes either. So if you walk into a room, you're talking to a CFO or you're talking to someone managing an operations department, you sell this great dream, but you say, actually, we're going to need loads of data, we're going to host this all on a cloud, and we're not sure we'll give you the right output anyway, it won't be fully accurate, it's a tough conversation. What really was interesting around RPA was I think I'd almost misclassified it, and I think we'll get straight kind of into like what UiPath is and why it got people's attention. And it's in small writing down here, but it was actually this Series C funding, which was in 2018 in August. And like many of us, I was on LinkedIn and I was kind of scrolling through. And in my mind, RPA and the term robotics, I was like, oh right, this is these guys, Blue Prism, I know them. I worked with some of those guys before, one of the startups. They've taken this idea of test automation, where you have software that simulates user clicks, and they've added some data scraping, and they've called it robotics. All right, I know what this is. I know the weaknesses in it. I know where it can be used, but it has its place, but it's not interesting, and it's not as cool as machine learning because that's really intelligent. That requires a lot of data science. That was my kind of approach to it. When I saw the Series C funding numbers, it was $225 million of investment into UiPath in around about September. It must have been September 2018, and that literally stopped me in my tracks. Not just the number, but then if you looked at who was investing, it included Capital G, Sequoia Capital, some of these companies that have invested in in Skype. Capital G is Google's investment arm. So that really made me think that maybe I've misclassified what RPA is and where its place is really. And kind of why I'm here, to be honest. So when I started talking to them during an interview process around the roles they had, what I saw was that this trend of taking the RPA technology, which is around simulating user clicks, running through the steps that people would do, taking that but adding some machine learning, some AI, some data science on top of it. That was where the market was really going. It was really bringing these two technologies. And when I saw the value of that, I kind of realized, this is where you need to be. Now, analysts had talked about this. They've talked about intelligent automation, hyper automation. There's a lot of terms out there. But when talking to UiPath, there were practical examples of where this really kind of changed the dial in terms of what you could achieve with these automations. So since then, UiPath now has 5,000 customers, around 3,000 employees, and the total funding now in terms of our investments is over $1 billion. Claims to be the fastest enterprise growing software company in history as well. It's been an incredible journey. I've been there just over a year, but it feels like a lot longer. And interestingly, if you rewind maybe even 3 years, the company was about 60 people, I would say, 100 people, right, globally, we would say as well. So it's gone through a really rapid incline or increase, and it really feels like the right technology at the right time. What I'm planning to do today is give a little bit of an explanation around how we are responding to this trend around RPA and AI. First, I'll explain a little bit about what RPA is, give an example, and then we'll kind of get into what we're doing around RPA and AI. What I'm going to talk about is not focused on the project management domain, but I'm hoping it will spark some ideas. And just from some of the things I'm hearing just today and before the event and during the talk, I think it's probably quite an untapped area, in fact, because a lot of people spend a lot of time doing a lot of project management activities, and I think we could add a lot more automation there. So similar to what I was discussing, it's a hot topic now. So one stat there, KPMG, in terms of their analysis of what are the key trends. Robotic process automation was number 9 in 2018, and then 2019, last year, it's risen up to the second highest trend. And this has got all of the standard, you can play buzzword bingo, they're all on there. Blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, even biotech. So it's really gone through this rapid acceleration. Question actually for the audience, who's come across the term robotic process automation or RPA? Okay, great. Any people actually used the software, the UiPath or other softwares? I won't name them, but yeah, okay, that's a good number in the room, great. Okay, so that's good. That means you'll have a good grounding on kind of where it sits. So briefly, in terms of automation as a topic, which should be kind of, familiar to everyone because we've been talking about automation really for decades. What are the things it gives you? Well, it can accelerate the benefits you're going to get from your transformations, improve the customer experience because there's less waiting time, things can be seen as more straight through in terms of their processing. A key one is around reducing risks and compliance costs because you're reducing the manual work, which can be prone to errors, and you're putting more automated solutions in place that can be audited, for example, as well. So someone manually doing something today, yes, they could do something incorrectly, but also you don't have a record necessarily of how they did it, what they did. Okay, so that sounds great. What are the challenges? This one I really like because it's one of those where you kind of put this on a slide, and this is what I was taught, and we're almost probably trained to tell people this, that go for things where there's a defined set of rules. When you're defining your robotic process automation process to look at, if you want to do RPA, go with something that it's clearly defined and there's rules and there's no judgment. And the reason why I like that is because that is becoming kind of invalid in a way, because that's where really the AI and the decisioning is really chipping away at. It's not to the point where we say the first process you should now go for is one that has really, a really difficult decision. It's more like now you can start to think about it, where you had maybe pushed it to one side and said, there's some human decisioning involved, I don't want to look at that process. Now you can bring it back in and start reviewing it because of actually two things. One is the integration of AI, which we'll cover. But another topic, maybe for another day, is what we call a human in the loop, which is when you get to a decision point, when you want a user, put that in front of a human who can make that judgment, put the right information for them there, put it all in one screen, put it in a nice task that comes into their inbox where they can just give that piece of advice, approval, and then carry on your robotic process, your automated bit. So that's another way of adding intelligence, and we have an offering in that space as well. That's why you should do it. In terms of what the robots can do, typically you'll see things around them, logging into different applications, taking data from databases, moving files around. Typically anything you can do on the user front end, these robots can be set up to do that. One key thing is that it also goes beyond, this is one of my misconceptions on RPA, it does go beyond just front-end automation. One of our kind of key strengths of our platform, and to be fair, our competitors have this as well, are the number of integrations that we have with third-party applications. So if you are working with a Salesforce application, or if you're working with SAP or other mainstream applications that are in a lot of businesses, you can integrate and you can operate not just at the UI level, but you can do it more at the API level, and we achieve that through pre-built integrations. So although the core and where this technology emerged from is front-end automation, and one of our key strengths is that we can go to the front end, meaning if it is an old system from the ages ago, a very old system or system that doesn't have any APIs or the developers are gone, you can still interact like a user would. So that's one strength, but at the same time, you also have the ability to go in via APIs and pre-built integrations, all in the same platform. So that's another thing that really differentiates this area, or where this area is matured now, to allow the level of automation you can do being much broader. Emails is often one, monitor an email box, look for a specific email of a specific subject, pick up that email, maybe there's an attached invoice, pick up the PDF, have the robot run that through some OCR software to extract the key values, put that data into another application that you're logging to, say it's SAP, you're logging in, you're logging those key fields. That's a kind of typical process that we, the company, have been pushing out everywhere, because who doesn't have a finance department or an HR department where these processes are so frequent? Just to give a quick idea, actually, hopefully this will work. So this is just a quick video. It's a slightly different one in terms of someone putting together a PowerPoint report, but it will give you an idea of what it looks like when it's running through. So in this one, someone's prepared, it's a report that they're doing every week, and they've got all of the latest graphics for this week. And what the robot is doing is it's updating your existing PowerPoint. It's going to a particular folder. It's picking up the files that you've got the new values from. Obviously, you have to follow a kind of convention as to where you save the files. But other than that, the bot itself is updating the deck with the latest information, and it's setting the right file size, the position of the images. This one will move it to the right location. And it's a good example of one of those kind of repetitive things that we do very often, which is literally repetitive. There's no intelligence here. You're taking data from one system, you're putting it and you're presenting it, and you're formatting it in the same way every week, and then you're basically going to finish that report and send it on. So that's a typical example of kind of what I call sort of RPA version 1, if you like, a very basic automation where we're doing something with a very defined set of rules, but it adds value because person X would be doing this multiple times, a week potentially, and it could be replicated across your whole organization. Question?
Can your robots run on servers and do the same stuff?
Yeah, it can do, yeah. So you can have it. So we have two kind of modes of operation for our robots. So one is, they're called unattended and attended. So your unattended are basically running in your data centers, in your back offices somewhere on servers without any user interaction.
Interacting with Microsoft, PowerPoint.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, yeah. You can have it so they run some of these in the background. So for example, if you're interacting with Excel or PowerPoint, it doesn't have to open the application always and kind of like do all the same user clicks. There's kind of driver-based ways where you can do it, for example, with Excel without opening the file. And so yeah, and just to complete the loop on that explanation, you've got the ones running in the background on the servers, and then you also have ones that run more as a personal assistant on a user's desktop, where you can basically interact with them when you need them. So you may take a call from someone, maybe a call center operator. They're in the process of obtaining some customer information. At that point, they want to basically run a process. So they would go to the bot, kick it off, give it some information, and ask for it to run. So that's kind of the basics of it. Now let's talk a little bit about AI and machine learning. And in fact, actually, I'm going to start with this one really. So I think, and you can probably tell by the quality of the PowerPoint slide, here's one I made myself. Probably not UiPath approved, but so this is really trying to understand why I think these two worlds should actually come together, or they naturally fit together. So first of all, RPA is very quick to integrate and deploy. So this is one of its strengths, is that it's not a very invasive technology to get up and running. It's becoming even quicker when you start having more cloud offerings as well, where you can have a lot of the infra running as part of a virtual cloud, either on the customer's own private cloud or in the real cloud, if you like. And we have offerings in this space as well. And what you'll find is, however, on the flip side, machine learning and AI, like we used to spend ages in my previous life, once you've built your model, deploying it and integrating it with the infrastructure around you, especially if you're in a bank, is painful. It's not what the data scientists are really being paid to do. It's not what they enjoy doing as well, and it's very time consuming. So there is almost a need for a way to get your AI solution integrated quickly. Another thing as well is that once you've done your machine learning decisioning bit, so a typical example for it would be, say, fraud detection. So you've run some transactions through a bit of machine learning. That model's been trained on what fraudulent transactions look like, and it picks out particular transactions and said, I think these are fraud. We've probably all had that with us, with our credit card being declined as soon as we go on holiday or something like that. Now, it's great actually saying, yep, I've flagged this as fraud, but what happens before and after that process? What you typically find is there's an information gathering piece beforehand, and then afterwards, once you've made that decision, fraud or not fraud, there's usually some tasks needed afterwards. A case is opened in a system. The system requires reference data about who the customer is. So what we found as well is that the machine learning and AI is automating one part of the process, a complicated part of the process, but on its own, it isn't delivering the value. It's not integrating with the overall solution. And so there's a natural affinity here. And the reason, the other side, the flip side of that one is saying, well, your RPA process, your robot, as we saw in the earlier slide, it will run through a set of rules and that's it. If there isn't any decisioning, you're almost encouraged or discouraged as an RPA developer to even tackle it. But if you can integrate these worlds, then you get a really powerful solution, and so problems you couldn't automate or you couldn't fully automate, you're able to now automate. In terms of data, one thing around data as well is that naturally, as part of the robot running, it naturally does take data. So I'll take my invoice example. It comes in an email, and there's a PDF file, it's scanned. Maybe it's validated by a user as well, saying these are the fields I think are correct. Can the user validate it? The user checks it, says it's correct, and hits end, submit. That process naturally generates really useful data if you're a data scientist. What data scientists are crying out for is validated, accurate, clean data that they can train their models on. So this is another interesting thing. Well, actually, by running a lot of these processes right now, you're actually creating really useful information. So if you could bring these two worlds together, we're capturing data here. Often we're taking unstructured data in and we're structuring it. Can we link that to the machine learning side of it and provide that data into these systems that are looking for clean, accurate data? And then lastly is the one that, this is like the marketing one. People will like this one the most, I think, which is saying that, to take robots to the next level, they need to become more intelligent. UiPath uses the term to learn more skills. So it's that kind of thing to say, look, if we want to try and evolve this technology, we need it to be smarter. So that's why there's kind of a natural affinity here. Yes?
How are you managing the tension between, decisions or lack of? Because traditionally has been quite easy because accountability, responsibility is assigned to a physical person. Now, maybe some of these are treated as rules for triggering an action or something like that, but it could be a source of prejudices, for example, for jobs, CVs, and for mortgages. Deciding or moving a decision to a machine who is not really responsible. Or
accountable. So let me repeat the question for everyone. So the question was around how do you deal with that tension about taking something that might be a sensitive decision that now is being done by a faceless machine from something that was done by a human before, or, and I like where you were going with that, what about prejudice? Because if you're training your model based on previous history, then naturally that will influence what you're doing going forward. So I won't try and solve all of that problem because that's kind of a data science kind of industry-wide issue. Because that is the fundamentals of how your machine learning works effectively. There are ways of avoiding bias, but fundamentally you are training it on previous things. But what I will answer is around the moving for something to being done by a robot, because that's also, even in the more simple version where there's no machine learning, we still have that kind of fear factor or how can I still be happy with what's happening? So what we tend to do is we phase it in is what we normally do. So what we tend to find is, let's take a simple example of extracting data and the accuracy of the data extracted, so maybe less controversial. But even then, even if we're extracting data from an invoice and the OCR software we're using is giving a high confidence value, that, you know, I'm 90% confidence I've got this value correct, we have ways in our setup to basically say, initially, when we're starting to put this process into, say, a proof of concept or production, have a human validate that. Even if you think it's very accurate, have a human in the loop that basically checking that information and validating that it is correct before it goes out. And what we tend to find is that over a period of time, people get a little bit more comfortable with that. And then you can slowly reduce that threshold about when will a human look at it. Rather than it being every single record, it can then be reduced to slightly less than that. Having said that, though, it is something that is I think the people impact side of RPA is probably something that we spend a lot more time on than you'd think as well, because there is that fear of, you know, any automation, there's a fear, is it going to take my job away? Anytime the process is being done by someone faceless, there's that, well, who's accountable? So I think, A, it's a really major industry challenge. Secondly, I would say is we kind of phase it in over a period of time. And another way is with these robots is the more you can actually explain what you're doing and why, the better. And again, you know, explainable AI is more of a research area as well, but at least the robot can log at every step what it is doing so that you at least have an audit trail so you can go back and see what's happening. Thank you. So in terms of AI deployments, there's another stat I liked, and I have to admit I stole this from one of my colleagues because I like the slide, but apparently McKinsey are even saying that only 12% of enterprises have actually got their AI solution into production. So there's a lot of people spending a lot of money in here, and the graph on the left shows the hype outstripping even Moore's law around growth, yet we're still kind of, you know, not at the stage where companies are really getting the benefit of AI. I'm not going to stand there and say, you know, UiPath has the silver bullet for doing this, because there's many different reasons why it's difficult to deploy AI, but we certainly have something to say about it, and that's what I want to kind of talk to you about. So there's two aspects to our relationship with AI. Firstly is what we're actually adding to our core product. So in terms of the robots that you get out of the box, what can we do to those robots inherently to make them smarter, if you like? Again, I'm not crazy about that term, but I'll go with it. But what additional skills or functionality can we add to them to make them more useful in terms of their automation? So I'll just touch on 4 of the kind of pillars of AI that we're focusing on, which are visual understanding, process understanding, document understanding, and conversational understanding. So the first one, so visual understanding is we are trying to train the bot so that they can look at a user interface that they may have not seen before, and even if they can't get to the underlying code of how it works, we want them to be able to understand what's a drop-down button look like, which of these is a radio button, which is the text field I should be putting my information in, and even if that text field moves around, how do I find the right one? So it's a combination of different technologies. This is where UiPath's kind of heritage is, if you like, in this area of visual understanding. And really the idea is to say, actually, I should be able to look at any user interface. And I remember this came up during the interview process when I heard about what they were doing. They were taking a neural network, pumping it full of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of labeled user interfaces from SAP, Salesforce, and other platforms, so that the robots could intuitively interpret that user interface, and even if things moved around, they were able to kind of automate anyway. Another really useful application is when you're in a remote or virtual environment, because the way that works, like a Citrix environment, is you don't see the underlying application, you're just getting it as an image. So a lot of the techniques we would use in a normal Windows desktop environment don't work in that environment. So you need a way to be able to look at that interface and understand what it is. So this is one area, visual understanding, making the robots interpret the user interface in a more human-like way to make them more robust. Document understanding is around the kind of OCR, but going beyond that actually. Why should I have to train a system and create templates for the different documents I have? Why can't a system look at any kind of invoice, whether it's seen it in that format before or not, or any kind of other kind of legal documents, insurance documents that conform to certain standards? I want my robots to be able to pick up a lot of these common documents, and without me having to set anything up as a user or a business, I want it out of the box to be able to process these and extract the key information. Now I'm talking kind of aspirationally in terms of where we want to get to. Practically where we are is we've done invoices to a good state. We're working on another like 10 to 15 other standard, very popular documents in the industry across insurance and financial services. And we're trying to produce models that have already been trained so the user will be able to take these out of the box and get the benefit of that. And that will allow them to process these documents much quicker, pull out the key fields they need and pass that for downstream processing. Question? Yeah. Yep.
When you haven't seen a document before and you use machine learning to try and interpret it, what happens in the case that you misinterpret it and you end up going, okay, that's the number I need for that financial statement, I'll plonk it into my Excel monthly forecast. What happens, like how does...
So at the moment there's, with every extracted field we have a confidence rating. So it would be based on that, if it's something that, so basically it would be based on that confidence rating. If the confidence rating is low, we would then trigger it, we would pass it to our human in the loop validation. And if the confidence rating is high, it would go through, etc. Depending on that use case though, so if it is something that's absolutely critical, then you may need to do that for every single example. You may want to still extract the data, but still have it validated by every single kind of example. So there's, depending on how the client feels about it, you can kind of like adjust that threshold. Great, okay. Process understanding, again, that's probably a separate event. Oh, so you have a question?
Sorry, another question on the OCR.
Yep.
Is it primarily English language based? Do you work on the traditional documents in English language?
So the question there was, is it English language based and is that our main focus? So two answers to that. So initially or historically, we've always partnered with other companies to bring in the OCR. That's kind of been our mantra, has been, well, we'll do the core RPA bit and we're an open platform so you can integrate with different solutions. So one of our preferred partners is called Abi. So I think the Russian company actually, and they support a high number of different languages. In the solutions we've built ourselves, we've started off with I think 5, there's a set of core languages. It is English, but because we're a Romanian company and we trained it on our own invoices initially, it's also Romanian. I think French, German, and we're working on Japanese because we have a large customer base in Asia. So there is a set of languages to support that's growing based on us training it with more information effectively.
I must remember I'm from Turkey as well, and when I'm in the OCR, there is some options for tesseract on Microsoft Flight, AD, and the
Google OCR, yeah.
I tried with the Turkish language as well.
How'd it go?
It was good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, almost more than 90%.
Yeah, okay, great. So that was just some feedback around different types of OCRs. Yeah, traditionally we've come with some out-of-the-box integrations, and then we've said here are the other partners to focus on if you want a deeper integration. But what we found was document understanding came up so frequently with nearly every customer that it had to be something that was added into our core product. And responding to our competitors as well who are doing more of that because it's such a core area. The amount of paper-based documents in the working world is insane. So on the other two areas, so process understanding is a deep topic, but in summary, it's really trying to say, where should I start as a business? What is the process I should go after? And what we tend to find is that, customers will think they know the right areas to focus on, but really sometimes they'll choose the wrong areas. Or if you go down the traditional, I'm a BA and I've personally done this, you go and sit with an operations person and you ask them to explain what their process is and they list it out and you kind of go through it and you draw it. Then you speak to someone else in the same department and they'll do it something completely differently, achieving the same outcome. So what process mining, which is one term that's being used in the industry more, these technologies around process mining, process recording, what we're trying to do there is we're trying to give tools in our platform, and to be fair, we have 3 offerings and 2 of them are bought companies that were acquired recently, and the third is an in-house built solution. They're all in that space of trying to uncover which processes should I go after and why as well. And the process mining one will run analytics on your databases and your dashboards, and it will kind of actually try and piece together what your business process looks like in an automatic way and give you more data-driven decisions about why you should go after a particular process. Yeah.
Do you have some sort of process representation? Is it just like workflow or BPM? What kind of, if you're really minds of process, how do you?
Yeah, so it's interesting because if we tried to build something that looked like, it would have taken us ages, but we took a bit of a shortcut. So Process Gold is the company that we acquired a few months ago, and they have some fantastic visualizations, which are very mature because they've been around for about 15 years. But effectively, that does exactly what you're describing. It maps out the processes, and sometimes if you try to look at a process, it's a complete mishmash of spaghetti. So what they do really well is allow you to reduce the number of variations and say, first of all, show me the most common path through a process, and then through an interactive UI, you can bring in the edges, you can increase the level of detail, you can see the other exception routes. And by visually color coding, highlighting it, they'll kind of really highlight the really important information about your process. Follow-up talk, I think, will have to be on process mining. Conversational, just lastly on that, is around chatbots. How can we take what people are requesting via email, via different digital channels, maybe even via voice, and use that as a way to kickstart the initial piece of your process. So yes, at the moment we'll have bots running in contact centers where someone in the contact center can understand what the person's after and maybe put in a request to one of their bots to go and get some information, or maybe do something, maybe go and update a record somewhere else. But what if you can do more of that up front? What if you can get more information up front from a chatbot or from even maybe some voice recognition to understand what the user's doing and start building that, and start automating, even earlier. So that's the kind of pillar around conversational. Yeah, question at that.
Sorry, just very quickly. So I know you mentioned it earlier about the data. As people are, so for example, prehistoric data needs to be inputted, you're relying essentially on a lot of human input, other than just the documents that you have scanned in or whatever it may be. So people who are inputting it, humans inputting it, how are you relying on the accuracy of what they're inputting to then shape what's then being learned thereafter?
Yeah, so just a question to recap for everyone. So it's basically saying, for this to work, the human data being input up front and labeled, etc., has got to be right. And if that's wrong, you're never going to get the right output. Did I paraphrase that right? Yeah, totally agree. And it's quite funny because we're doing a project right now around invoice processing, and one thing the customer wants us to prove is that our results that we pull out match what's been entered into the end system, and we're taking those entries as correct, but they may be wrong because they may be human errors. So there's no silver bullet for that. All you can do is validate and test. When you're training it, you're probably going to need to do another level of validation, not just pull out the invoices entered from the month of January, but actually maybe validate that they're correct. Or maybe run both of them, and if you do get a discrepancy, look at the original invoice and see what's right. So you're right, you're only as good as the data being put in. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, and it was good this question came up, what about third parties? Yeah, we like to integrate and say that we are friendly to all of these integration partners in terms of getting AI into our products. So those areas are the key ones where we've built it ourselves because it comes up so often, but we're friendly to integrate with a lot of companies that offer their own specialization that we want to bring into our product to make them available. So in terms of our kind of the way our product stack looks like right now, so we've talked about this, we are using AI in 3 areas, I would say. One is around what we just talked about, understanding where to automate in the first place. The second is around making the robots run in a more robust way with the computer vision, allowing them to process more documents in terms of the OCR and doing that in a more smart machine learning way rather than template way. And lastly is around our analytics platform we've released recently, which is where we want to be able to provide program managers running these projects with meaningful output so they can show what they actually achieved. What was the business value of me doing all this, and what have I achieved by that? And we have some predictive analytics in there as well to kind of say, by adding more robots, how long, what impact will that have on my investment? We're generating some reports automatically in terms of natural language generation to say, your busiest robot this term was the robot X, it ran this amount of time, this is the number of invoices it processed with a total of this amount. So those are kind of the main areas where we're applying artificial intelligence across our kind of stack. Let me skip on in the interest of time. This is just saying how the 2 worlds that were quite separate in terms of data scientists and RPA, we think they will come more together. And to facilitate this, and this is the last thing I want to really touch on before I finish, is what we're doing as a company is we're trying to bring these worlds together, because we think if they at least have a common platform or interface where they can integrate, it will be better for RPA and it'll be better for AI. So we call this AI Fabric. And what AI Fabric is a platform where you can upload your machine learning models, so they get deployed into AI Fabric, and then as a RPA developer, when you're building your automation, you will be able to drag and drop in an activity. That activity will tell you the list of available models that you can call, and it's a very standardized interface. You give it a set of data, it returns a prediction. But what that allows you to do, it allows your data scientists to focus on building the models, and we currently support models built in Python. We're working on R and other languages. Build it in Python, package up that model, and basically upload it to us as a zip. And then as a data scientist, your job then in terms of integration is done. Now it's over to the RPA developer. The RPA developer doesn't need to know anything about data science. All they need to know is when I get to that point in my workflow, when I need to make a decision and I want to call this machine learning model, I can drag in that activity, it will connect to our orchestrator, I can look at the available models, select the one I want. That will then return a result. Maybe it's churn prediction, is someone about to leave my organization or not? It will maybe return a score as well. And after that, my robot can then carry on going through the rest of their process. So what AI Fabric really is a way to integrate the machine learning models with the RPA platform in a really quick, easy to use way. Now, yes?
Are you building this, or this is production ready now?
It's available now. So it's in private preview right now. Currently it's available to those customers who are using our cloud orchestrator. But in the next few weeks and months, by at least April, I think, we'll have it available for general availability.
Am I right to think that you are sort of tying some technologies and sort of plugging that?
Yeah, exactly.
And also white labeling other technologies like the OCR type of thing? Or is it mainly...
It is, you're right, it's in-house built. We're using some open source stuff for this. We're using, I think it's Kubernetes. There's some stuff around Seldon.ai is another company that we partnered with on this, and we're taking kind of best of breed and we're packaging it up and we're making it available within our orchestrator. On the OCR side, that is using, again, some open source libraries along with collaboration with, the Googles, the Microsofts and others to try and get that.
It's already leveraging some of the big tools, right?
Yep.
Some of the well-established platforms.
Yeah.
There's no need to reinvent the wheel.
That's right. Having said all of that, if you wanted to, for example, do handwriting recognition right now, the way is Microsoft have got, on Microsoft Azure, they've got Cognitive Pack, you can do handwriting recognition, and UiPath lets you integrate with that. So you would set up your account on Azure, but you can integrate it very easily using UiPath. So again, we're not trying to solve that problem directly, although having said that, we might do because it comes up a lot. But we make it easy to partner with other companies and integrate. So this is really the main message for us, really. So you can bring your own data science models. So if you've got data scientists in your company, they can build their own models and upload them. We will start offering more out-of-the-box models for some very typical use cases. And then also, the open source and our partner community. So we spend a lot of time working with the big four consultancies, but other niche firms as well. We want people to build models that they think are relevant, upload them to our UiPath Go marketplace. You can do that and make it available for free, or you can have a free trial version and people can come to you for a paid version, support different models. We want to kind of make it really easy for people to submit useful models, but then allow them to be integrated into our platform. That's really the vision around this. Last thing I'll say is, in terms of a process where we've used this, one has been around classification of emails. So banking customer, say 300 emails a day, I think, or maybe more than that, 3,000 a day it was, coming into a particular mailbox. A machine learning AI model was basically there doing the email triage, trying to work out what type of email it is. Is it a complaint? What's the sentiment on it? And where should I be sending it to in terms of the different departments? So the robot would then be basically putting that into the right particular folder, and it could also flag whether it was a complaint or not. To the point earlier, there's models out there that do this, so it wasn't a case of having to kind of reinvent the wheel. It's more a case of integrating it. And then the last bit, which is where we think the value is of automating all of this or linking these two worlds together, is once you've done the classification, is actually actioning off the back of it. So if it is an email that falls into a category where you understand the request, it's maybe a request for some information about an insurance policy, you're able to validate it came from the right person, and you're comfortable, then you could maybe even go away, get that policy information for the user in an automatic way, and serve the request completely automatically. That's kind of the vision. Where things fall, it depends how comfortable you are with that, what checks you want to do, etc. But that's one of the examples of where you can kind of do this. And the decisioning and the understanding in this section here and the classification allows you to be able to then serve those automatically. Okay, cool. That's the last slide. Thank you.
Superb, Arif. Thank you much. Have you got any questions, anybody? That was quite a quick canter through.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll come back to you.
Thank you. My name is Farhan. I'm an RPA consultant, and I'm just curious about the is there any new feature for the as a handwritten documents?
So handwritten documents is subject.
It's very impossible to.
Yeah, subject close to my heart because I had to do that for a customer. So at the moment, what I've used is more handwritten forms. Is what I was been looking at. So I've kind of used Microsoft Azure's handwriting recognition. So I set up an account on Azure for free, and I think you can do 300 documents a month for free without incurring any cost. So take any image within UiPath, send it to the Azure activity. You just need your account details and a key, the URL and a key, and then it will take everything back and it will send you back the text along with the coordinates of where it found it. So give that a try.
If you think of two customers, customer A investing 5 million on this platform and strategic plans and everything, and then another customer B investing 20k, just proof of concept type of thing, get the license. What does the journey look like for those two? And also, where do you spend your time? Like, what's time consuming during that journey? And what are the challenges?
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, you just described my day job. So I'll try and be brief. Okay, I have customers like that. So I have some customers who are running at maybe 4 or 5 robots. They wouldn't typically have someone in my role assigned, but we've done it because the sales guy gave a great pitch about their potential. They're still with that, 4 or 5 robots. Why is it not growing? So what does that look like for a customer at that scale? What that looks like is they would have seen an example specifically. Normally finance or HR is where people initially start because it's quite well understood what those processes look like. So they would normally have done a little bit of finance, a little bit of HR. They would have got some benefit, but what they're kind of lacking is really understanding the breadth of what they can cover with this technology. So what it tends to find there is the challenge there, and it's very real, because I had, that was my day, some of my day today was, what you need to do there is you need to elevate the level of conversation so it's not in one department. You need to share with them what we've done in other companies with the other departments, share some industry solutions. And then also another really powerful way is actually empower the users, right? Get this technology out there. So one thing I'm doing with that customer is we're doing an internal webinar where me and the lead of their automation team are doing kind of a webinar just so people understand what this technology is capable of. And the call to action at the end of the webinar is UiPath has recently released a tool just to help crowdsource ideas, really. So it's like a web-based platform where people can submit their ideas for automation. So at the end of the webinar, we want to kind of go, here's what we've done at this customer, here's what this tech can do, think about the mundane, and by the way, log some ideas here. Because we think that way will be another way as well, is kind of getting the people on the ground thinking, well, actually, I really don't enjoy spending 2 hours of my week every week doing that task. Wouldn't it be great if we could automate? And quickly answering your other question about the really big investment, I can talk about this because it was publicly announced. So PwC, for example, went the full other extreme. They embraced our vision of a robot for every human, which is like, one of the mantras around UiPath, similar to how Bill Gates said that for computers. So they literally have rolled out UiPath robots onto all of their desktops. They've done it in the US, they're doing it globally. And there the game is different. There it's less about, the amount of hours processing in finance, and if I save 50 hours building a business case. It's more a case of, and this is a real example, all of my consultants every week submit timesheets. To do that, they have to go into a clunky old system, etc., and fill in other fields. Now, if I just saved 10 minutes on that, but I multiplied that across my entire consultant population, actually I get quite a good return on investment. So that's kind of the other extreme, is when you're kind of doing more of the citizen robot for every person, and you're looking for those small use cases that are broadly applicable across your organization. And ultimately, you would do all of those as well as your internal projects as well. So hopefully that answers the, yep.
If you're a citizen developer or someone that doesn't really have a programming background, where would you recommend starting? Or is there any resources available where you could learn the basics? Where would you start?
So I think our platform is really suited to that. So 6 months ago, if you had asked, I would have said we've got a platform that doesn't require much coding anyway. There's a downloadable free version, which is true. And you can also, all the online training is free as well. Having said that, I would have known that there's still some programming terminology in that platform, like loops, variables are still talked about in our platform. In the last few months, we've released a more cut-down version of our studio called Studio X, which I think was referred to. It's going to be used at your hackathon, which is brilliant. And Studio X is more targeted at the example I gave around timesheets, where you want to automate things that are more desktop-based, that are more targeted to end users. And that Studio X is basically email, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, key desktop applications, simple tasks that you do, trying to make that as easy as possible to automate, and you absolutely don't need a developer background for that. And also with all of our products, all of our training is available for free online as well. And also we offer free versions of all of this for non-commercial use, so people can download and get going really quickly, really easily. And lastly, there's a massive UiPath community and forum, which is probably one of our kind of key assets that are supporting this technology. In fact, we get teased sometimes that people get a faster response on the forum than they do via our own production support team. So 6 minute SLA, really, yeah. So there's a really good community for people doing exactly that, as you described, yeah.